How y'all doing? I had some folks that needed a copy of today's lesson. I've got 3 copies. Who needs one? Okay. You get the last of the originals, and you get the relays. Should be the same thing. I've got some more copies now, but the copier just did not finish by the time we got started. So I will be getting more copies. Good to see everybody here this morning. We're glad that you have chosen to join us. This has got to go for now. I apologize for being late. I was trying to get the copier to push along to as many of these as I could. But when you say duplex to a copier, it really cuts the time in half, or doubles the time, excuse me. And I got it working right now. I will have more copies. Who else needs a copy in here, by the way? We've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, I will have some more here by next week. I apologize, but the copier just won't work so fast when working like this. All right, lesson 2, we have gotten about halfway through it, and we will take up lesson 2, a new commitment. And if you're just now getting your copy, be sure to read what is called lesson 1. It's really not a lesson, it's just like an introductory thoughts, kind of let you know what we're going to be doing in here. As I said when we began this, I hope that I don't say anything that you don't already know. This is a refresher course in basic principles of Christianity. We do have relatively new Christians in here this morning, and which is the reason we chose this particular study for those folks, and to refresh ourselves on basic principles of Christianity, because if we don't have the foundation, we will never grow properly. And that's the concept behind this particular study. Feel free to make comments, ask questions. I don't think we'll hit anything that's really controversial in this class, but if you have questions on anything we discuss, we'll be more than happy to talk it over with you. All right. Let's begin this morning with a word of prayer. Steve, would you direct us in prayer, please?
Lord, we thank you for this Lord's Day that you give us, Father. Thank you for the time, the love that you have for us every day, Lord. We ask that you be with us now as we look into your word, help us to have open hearts and open minds. Thank you for those that are here today. We pray for those that are on prayer list, Lord, that you be with them. Thank you for our family here. Thank you for the love that we have. Be with us now, help us to be more committed to Christ.
Amen. Okay, the last thing that we were doing in your book, following scriptures to help illustrate the kind of commitment that Jesus could rightfully expect of us as Christians. We had gotten about halfway down through that list and gotten down to Matthew chapter 16 and verse 24, and we will take up there. These are passages that give us indications as to how we need to live our lives as Christians, things that God actually expects of us, things that Christ and the apostles directed the Christians of the early day in how to direct their affairs and how to direct their lives in serving God from day to day. So we've gotten down to Matthew 16 and verse 24. So let's read this passage of Scripture and see what this would actually tell us about our Christianity. Jesus said unto his disciples, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Now this is probably one of the most used verses in the New Testament. And we should be very familiar with this particular passage. Because in order to gain something, if you're going to keep a balance in life, in order to gain something, you've got to give up something. Is that basically true? Let's say you have a 2-car garage and you have 3 cars, and you want all of your cars in a garage. You got a choice of one of 2 things. You either build another garage or you get rid of a car, don't you? If you want all your cars to be covered. Generally speaking, we wouldn't build a 3rd garage. We would just simply get rid of the 3rd car, which if we don't use it. So, basically it's a give and take. You give up something in order to gain something else. And Jesus is telling us here that if we want to gain Him, what do we need to give up? Ourselves. Now, that's a big word when you stop and think about it. Because when you give up yourself, that means that you're possibly going to have to give up a lifestyle. You may have to give up a characteristic of your life. You may have to give up habits that you have. You may have to give up things that may be very important to you and that have always been very important to you in order to gain Christ. Now, Paul was very quick to say he would rather gain Christ and lose all these other things. And what did he say about all the other things? He counts them as what? Lost. They're nothing to him. If he can have Christ, he is willing to give up everything in order to have it. And that's exactly what Jesus is telling us here. If we want Christ, if we want Christianity in our lives, there are going to have to be some things of this world that is simply going to have to go. And he's saying in order to give up these things, you're literally going to have to deny yourself these things. Give up these things in your life. And then he says you're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to take up the cross. Okay. What did he mean by taking up the cross? First of all, did Jesus take up the cross? Yes, he did. In fact, he physically took up the cross, didn't he? We have recorded of his actually bearing the cross to Calvary. And the weight of the cross actually broke him down, and he had to have help with it on his way to Calvary. But he took up that cross and carried that cross. And what he is telling us is that we're going to have to take up the cross. Now, we know that the cross was difficult for Jesus, wasn't it? What he's telling us here, that sometimes in taking up the cross, it may be difficult for us as well. Is Christianity always easy? No. Do we find at times maybe Christianity to be challenging? Do we find times that when we enjoy a particular lifestyle or a particular thing in life that is worldly, that could be considered as sinful, and God asks us to give it up? That's what he's saying. When you take up that cross, you may have to give up something that is that important to you. So you deny yourself these things and you take up the cross, which again may be difficult for us to do. But this is what Jesus is telling us. It may not always be easy to be a Christian. There are times that we are going to have to give up things that we desire. You know, it's just like his encounter with the rich young ruler. The rich young ruler actually came to Jesus looking for right answers. And when Jesus told him the right answer, it was the wrong answer for him in his own mind. He was not willing to give up himself, the riches that he had, the love that he had for them, and the lifestyle that he had because of them. He was not willing to give them away and take up the cross. So he went away sorrowful, it says. So it would not have been an easy thing to do. And sometimes we find Christianity is not an easy thing to do. We have to give up things that Christ has said is not a part of Christianity. And then he says, follow me, which is probably one of the more important things that he could say. Why do we need to follow Jesus? Okay, let's say we're going to deny ourselves. We're going to give up all these things that are important to us because we want to love Jesus more. And let's say we take up the cross. We are willing to bear the difficulties and the unpleasantness sometimes of being a Christian. I'm not trying to paint a picture that Christianity is hard, it's difficult, and we never need to try it because it's a hard thing to do. I'm not trying to say that, because Christianity is by far the most wonderful thing that we can do for ourselves. So let's say that we've done that. Let's say that we've given up the things of our life that are there, and we want to love God. We want to follow Jesus. So we take up that cross, even though sometimes it's difficult. But then we actually have to follow him. When Jesus was here, he did one thing for us that no other man could do. He left us an example to follow. Do you ever find yourself following someone or following a particular pattern because it has worked for someone else? You ever find yourself doing that? I brought out in a sermon, this has been a few weeks ago now. I did it when I was a teenager. Most of you probably did. You know, with teenagers, you have two types of people. You have those who will lead and those who will follow. And you will find that if you're watching a group of teens, there's going to be one or two that's always dominant. They're the ones that's always going to speak out. They're the ones that's always going to make suggestions. They're the ones that's always going to have a particular mannerism. And before you know it, then all the other kids that are around that one or two people, they're going to start acting like those one or two. If one of them has a particular laugh, everybody's going to try to laugh that way. If one of them has a particular mannerism, they're all going to try to develop that mannerism. That's how teenagers work. At least they did when I was a teenager. What I see today, it still works that way. We follow people, don't we? So Jesus gave us the example to follow. He is the one. That's why he said, follow me. Paul said, imitate me as I imitate Christ. By the time Paul made this statement, Christ had already left, so the people needed another example. So Paul said, look, I'm it, because I imitate Christ. So therefore you imitate me as I imitate Christ. So Jesus, even through Paul, is still our example to follow. So we give up the things that are worldly, that are we feel that we just have to have, that could be wrong in our lives. We take up the cross, which means we do it even though it's difficult, and we follow Jesus. That's what this verse is trying to tell us. So this is how we develop our Christianity, by taking up, denying ourselves, taking up the cross, and following him. Questions, comments on that? All right, let's move on down then to Luke chapter 6, verse 46. Luke 6, verse 46. And why call you me Lord, Lord, and not do the things which I say? What does this mean? Anybody have an answer for this one?
We have to obey the law.
Okay. It's more than words, isn't it? Now, everyone in this room who are Christians, we've said the words, haven't we? We have said that we believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. We have made that confession. We have stated within our lives, I am a Christian. I am a follower of Jesus Christ. Why do you do that and not do the things that he says? Because it takes more than words. You know, there are many religions in this world today that's going to tell you that all you have to do is say that I am a Christian. Right? It's going to go out over the airwaves today, television. I guess they still do it on radio and internet particularly. And they're going to tell you that all you have to do is accept Jesus Christ into your heart and you are saved. I'm not going to someone to find that in the Scripture. It's not there, but you can look for it. It takes more than words to be a Christian. There has to be an element of obedience. And this kind of goes back to what we've talked about in Matthew 16. Jesus is our example. He tells us and shows us how to do that. How by following him, how to live that example within ourselves for other people to live. How to be the kind of man or woman that we need to be as a Christian. Because we can say it all day long. Husbands, if you tell your wife every day, I love you, I love you, I love you, and you never do anything to show that love, what good have you done? None whatsoever. We have to demonstrate our Christianity. It is not a lackadaisical element. Christianity is not. It is something that demands work, that expects work. It expects obedience. And of course, he's talking to a group of people here who are obviously not following him. He said, look, why do you tell me you follow him when you really don't? And I just wonder how many people today are going to walk through the doors of a church building somewhere and claiming, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian. And you may be for an hour or two, and you'll probably be righteous while you're in the building. But boy, as soon as them doors close behind you and you're outside of the influence of the people here at this church, what do you do then? That's where Jesus said, Luke, it takes more than words. You can come here all day long and say, I love Jesus, and then you can walk outside of these walls, and then if you no longer show that fact that you love Jesus, what have you done? Well, you've mocked it is what you've done. You've mocked it. So, why call me Lord, Lord, if you're not going to do it? You know, James said, be ye doers of the word and not hearers only. You have to do more than just sit and understand and listen and say, I comprehend. You have to actually develop yourself as a Christian. Questions, comments on that? Y'all stop me anytime.
That's why he tells us to be the light of the world.
Okay, and you're right. And we can't be a light. We can't say I'm a light of the world if we're not going to be that light. Right? Good point. Okay. I think that's one in here, isn't it? I don't know. All right. Philippians chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. Y'all excuse me, my bifocals, trifocals, whatever they call these things, are not working right this morning. Philippians 2, 1 and 2. If there be therefore any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any bowels and mercies, fulfill my joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. What do you think Paul's trying to tell us here? Okay?
Well, since Christ provides us with love, fellowship, spirit, affection, and mercy, then we can be made happy by following his example of doing the same thing. Have the same mindset.
Okay.
And then we
Okay.
like,
Do you think that Christian religion in general has accomplished that? No. There are hundreds of groups out there who say we are doing this. The difference is we are doing this our own way. Now, most of y'all have been in our Wednesday night study that we have just finished, where we discussed how the different religious groups actually behave, none of which have behaved correctly. They all went in different directions, teaching different things, having different ideas, and just really made a shambles of Christianity. That's about the best way to say it. They made a shambles of it. Paul is saying, look, we need to think alike. We need to understand the Scriptures the same way. And the only way that we can understand the Scriptures the same way is to understand it in the sense that it was given to us. Now, let me give you a really simple example of this. When you first started to school, and your teacher told you that 2 plus 2 would be 4, did that ever change? Does 2 plus 2 equal 4 today? Now, some of us haven't been in first grade. Well, I haven't been in first grade for 57 years. And you know 2 plus 2 is still 4. Some things don't change. And everybody, if you're going to do math, and I know we've got some math wizards in here, I am not one of them. If you're going to do math, and you do it on the principle 2 plus 2 don't equal 4, you ain't going to make it. Because that's a foundation that's just simply got to be, isn't it? And we have to keep that foundation. Because it's always going to be right. Now, when Christianity was new, the apostles laid it out clear for everybody to understand, for everybody to be able to conceive the idea of what Jesus wanted as he built his church. Now, as long as that foundation is in place, if you can build correctly upon that foundation, it's going to be right, isn't it? But what happens if on that foundation somewhere you put in there that 2 plus 2 don't equal 4? What's going to happen to that foundation? It's going to fall. I have to tell you, when Pat and I, we built a house back in Alabama. We didn't do it. We paid somebody else to do it. We had a house built back in Alabama. And man, I had studied those blueprints inside out, upside down, and sideways. And they poured the foundation for the house. They already had, we had our house built on a concrete slab. They put down the block, they poured the concrete, everything was smooth, it was beautiful, it was strong. It was wrong. They built that foundation wrong. And when they started to go up with the walls, they discovered, hey, this isn't right. These measurements are not matching. So they had to tear it down and start again. What they actually had to do was redo the blueprint to match the foundation that they had poured, because you just can't undo concrete, can you? Yeah. So, as a result of that, instead of having a 24-foot front porch, we had a 20-foot front porch, and Mandy had a 4-foot exercise closet in her bedroom. That was the fix for that. I don't know, I guess that was a good fix. But you see, they didn't start it out right, and they had to go back and redo it. The foundation has to be right. Paul is saying, look, the only way you're going to be able to do this is everybody think the same way. Everybody move in the same direction. Everybody doing the same thing. Everybody understanding the blueprint and following the blueprint the way it should be followed to begin with. Questions on that? Okay. All right. This one, a little harder to do. Philippians 2, verse 3. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem each other better than themselves. My daddy used to ask me when I would go to school, when I was a little boy, I'd come home from school, and he'd say, well, son, you have a good day at school? Yes, sir. Do what the teacher said? Yes, sir. You see anybody you like better than yourself? How do you answer that? How do you answer that? You know what I'd say? Of course not. And still be considered and looked upon as one of the greatest apostles that have ever lived. Because his heart was with God. His heart was with God. Yes, he made mistakes. Paul made mistakes. But their hearts was with God. See, that's what God calls completeness. When you give me your life, when you give me your heart, I know you're going to mess up. I know you're going to do things that are wrong. But if your heart is with me, it can be complete. So every one of us in this room, we can't be perfect as we understand perfect. But we can be perfect the way it was meant in the Greek language to be complete. And that's not to say, okay, that I can't be perfect, so I'm going to go out here and I'm going to sin and I'm going to do this and I'm going to have a good time. That's not what this is saying at all. Because what this is saying that is if you are complete, if you are, that means you're going to give God your best and you're not going to want to go out there and do those things and continue those sins. That's what completeness is. You have given over all of these things and now you are a follower of Jesus. Questions on this? Okay. Well, he's fixing to ring the bell. Next week, we will go over very rapidly the questions at the end of this lesson. Prepare lesson 3, which is saved by grace. And boy, that one ought to be a good one. Okay? We'll do that next week. Thank y'all so much for your comments, for your attention.